After a roller coaster week 17, we break down the Commanders' 54-point thriller, uncovering what worked, what didn't, and why Olamide Zaccheaus' recent spike in production might just be the spark they need against the Dallas Cowboys.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, David Harrison, covering the Washington Commanders for CommanderGameDay.com, part of Sports Illustrated, and I'm here with you every Monday through Friday. You can also find me helping out with WUSA9.com's local coverage of the team this season as well. I thank you for coming through for today's episode. To all of our everydayers out there, a special thank you to you for coming through every single day. Of course, Locked On Commanders is your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders. And if you haven't already, you can subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you are listening to today's episode, which we're going to talk about my favorite Dan Quinn quote of the weekend. We're also going to hand out some game balls following the Washington Commanders' victory over the Atlanta Falcons. We're going to talk about why the boldness and the success on fourth downs was absolutely critical to beating the Atlanta Falcons and is something that they want to see moving forward into Week 18 against the Dallas Cowboys, but especially into the playoffs. But we're going to start it all off talking about Olamide Zaccheaus' amazing revenge game against the Atlanta Falcons. We're going to do all of that thanks to our friends over at PrizePicks. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the promo code, all lowercase, LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play your first $5. Olamide Zaccheaus' recent spike in production might just be the spark that the Washington Commanders need against the Dallas Cowboys in Week 18. We're going to do our after-action review here on this Tuesday episode. And, of course, as always, we're talking about what was supposed to happen, what did happen. We're going to have three things to sustain moving forward, three things to improve moving forward, and then we're going to get into our quote from Dan Quinn and hand out some game balls. So what was supposed to happen in Week 17? Well, the Washington Commanders were supposed to win by 4.5 points. That was the spread on FanDuel. The Washington Commanders favored by 4.5 points. The over-under on the total points scored in this competition was set to 47.5 points. My score prediction, 34 for Washington, 10 for the Atlanta Falcons. A little bit bolder than the insider score prediction. The insider score prediction, Washington Commanders 24, the Atlanta Falcons 17. So I had a little bit bigger of a spread. Turns out that the Washington Commanders won by 6 points, so no matter what, they covered that spread on FanDuel at 4.5 points, and the total points scored was 54, so eclipsing that over on the total over-under. Now, I was closer to the Washington Commanders score, isolated. They scored 30. I predicted 34, but the insiders were closer on the Falcons score, predicting 17. I predicted 10 there, so obviously I didn't give the Atlanta Falcons, I guess, enough credit. Now, getting into our three things to sustain, or three things to improve. I call it stash and trash over on Sports Illustrated's Commander Game Day. So the three things we're going to stash from Week 17. The first one is going to be this revenge tour finale. Receiver Olamide Zaccheaus was an undrafted free agent out of Virginia in 2019 when the Atlanta Falcons, who were then led by head coach Dan Quinn, took a chance on him and brought him over to the team. Now, eventually, Olamide left. He went to the Philadelphia Eagles for a year. Then he rejoined Dan Quinn, came along with Brian Johnson, who was an offensive coach for the Philadelphia Eagles last week, here to the Washington Commanders. And in Week 16, so against the Philadelphia Eagles, that veteran was instrumental in the Washington Commanders defeating the Philadelphia Eagles. But in Week 17, he proved even more critical in helping the Commanders beat yet another former team for Olamide Zaccheaus. So you can call it a revenge tour, whatever you want to call it. But the bottom line is, in the last 2 weeks, OZ has had 13 passes caught, 13 catches, 155 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And he was one really bad holding call against Sam Cosmi. Not that Sam Cosmi held really bad. The call itself was really bad. If that call doesn't get made, Olamide's got another 2 yards, another catch, and another touchdown. So he was, that close to having 4 touchdowns in this 2-game stretch. Whatever Olamide Zaccheaus has got going on, the Washington Commanders have got to love it. They've got to obviously want to see even more of it, and especially coming into a playoff run here in a couple weeks, they're going to need to do that. However, they're also going to need some of these fourth down calls to play off as they have, but they're going to need to clean up the costly penalties and missed opportunities and the shaky run defense as we get into some of the areas to improve. We got 2 more areas that we want to see sustained from the Washington Commanders Week 17 contest, and I labeled this next one, wear your stripes, right? We're going to talk about these fourth down conversions because it's something that also came up during the Monday night game, the Detroit Lions and the San Francisco 49ers. And these are 2 coaches, Dan Campbell and Dan Quinn, who love to be confident, they love to be aggressive, and they love to go for it on fourth down. Now, Dan Campbell is obviously a little bit more demonstrative in his way that he is aggressive with his team. Dan Quinn, not quite as demonstrative about it, but make no mistake about it. Like Dan Quinn and Dan Campbell are cut from the same cloth as far as their attitude approaching the game, and especially going forward on fourth downs. So being aggressive, being a guy who believes in his guys on the field and wanting to capitalize on their potential and their ability is really nothing new to this Washington Commanders team this season. So when he went for it on fourth down in week 17 against the Falcons 3 times, I didn't agree with all of them, but it wasn't that it was a surprise. Like, it definitely wasn't that it was a surprise, or I expected him not to. But it turned out to be the critical move. It turned out to be incredibly important in the flow of this game. The first fourth down try resulted in a 7-yard pass to Olamide Zaccheaus, which was the first touchdown of the game for the Washington Commanders, for the Atlanta Falcons, for the entire game. The next one came in the third quarter. Dan Quinn's team was down 10 points. 3 plays after that fourth down conversion, Washington was only down 3 points after Jayden Daniels finds tight end Zaccheaus in the end zone to score the team's second touchdown of the night. Another fourth down conversion came in the third quarter. This one at the Atlanta 39 from 4th and 5. So a little bit longer of a fourth down conversion than we're used to seeing, but you're kind of in this position at the Atlanta 39. You tack on 7 more yards, you're at the 46, and now you tack on 10 more yards. You're talking about a 56-yard field goal. That's not really the range that you're going to be super confident in Zane Gonzalez right now. So you don't really want to go for the field goal, but you're too close to punt. So you kind of just got to go for it. That's just going to be kind of the way that it is. Jayden Daniels finds Jeremy McNichols for a 6-yard gain to get the exact yardage, 1 more yard than they needed on that 4th and 5. 7 plays and 4 Chris Rodriguez Jr. carries later, the Washington Commanders had their 3rd touchdown of the night, their first lead since early in the first quarter. 3 of their 4 touchdowns. The only touchdown that did not include a fourth down conversion in week 17 was the overtime touchdown game winner. Every other touchdown the Washington Commanders scored against the Atlanta Falcons had a fourth down conversion involved, whether it was the actual fourth down conversion being the touchdown to Olamide Zaccheaus, or if it was a fourth down during the drive involved that helped set up the touchdown. Look, when you know who you are as a team, when the player knows who you are as a coach and they know what to expect, these are the types of things that happen. So I know Dan Campbell gets criticized for it, and these are the decisions that coaches are going to make. Right now, we're praising Dan Quinn for making these decisions because his team is converting them, they're turning into points, and they're getting wins. But of course, if Dan Campbell, is making these decisions and they're also turning into wins, I know the Lions end up winning that game, but at the time they were kind of struggling. They weren't leading the entirety of the game, things like that. That's where teams and that's where coaches start to get criticized. So it takes a lot of, call it moral courage, right? Self-confidence to make those calls as a coach, because you understand that if it doesn't work out, you're going to get criticized for it. But you put that criticism to bed and you say, look, this is who we are. This is who I know we can be, who we want to be, and we're going to go ahead and make that happen. Another thing that the Washington Commanders know about themselves, they got a quarterback that can make great decisions even as a rookie quarterback, which is why everybody across the organization is no longer looking at Jayden Daniels as a rookie quarterback. There's one play specifically that really emphasized the decision-making ability and the trust that this coaching staff has in Jayden. We're going to talk about that along with the areas that this team needs to improve coming out of week 17 next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you in part by Rocket Money. And the question is, did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? Because that's definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you cancel your unwanted subscriptions. It monitors your spending, and it helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium services. For me, again, my favorite feature of the app is that subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services that I don't use anymore or didn't want to use anymore, or even one that I was paying twice for under different email accounts. So cancel your unwanted subscription and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. From the Week 17 win over the Atlanta Falcons demonstrates to me just how much this team knows what they have in Jayden Daniels and how much they trust his decision-making. That's going to be our final sustain for this weekend's after-action review. Then we'll get into our 3 things to improve moving into Week 18 and the playoffs. And if you want to get even more out of the Locked On Commanders podcast, all you got to do is sign up to be a Locked On Commanders insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. From there, you can text me your thoughts, your questions, your comments. I'm going to text you all kinds of other stuff, including live coverage of press conferences during the game, inside information, and you'll get access to our insider-only Zoom conferences, which are a lot of fun before games, after games, always having a lot of fun in there talking about Commanders football. So join subtext.com/LockedOnCommanders to try it out for free for the first 2 weeks. So 3 times the scoring power. The Washington Commanders have a quarterback that knows how to turn nothing into something. And unfortunately, we've had to see more and more situations where the Washington Commanders have needed Jayden Daniels to basically be the catalyst that gets the run game going. We saw that again against the Atlanta Falcons. But it's not just about what Jayden's abilities are. It's also about the coaching staff understanding what Jayden's abilities are and then trusting him to make the right decision at the time that they need him to do so. And there's a play very early in the game. There are, of course, multiple places where you can point to, but this first play this fourth down conversion, I should say, of the game really stood out to me because optionality is the key in some of these situations. I know that General Manager Adam Peters loves that word, loves having that optionality, and that flexibility is never going to be a bad thing. So when offensive coordinator Kliff Kingsbury needs a 4th down call that would ensure that the early interception by safety Quan Martin doesn't go to waste, he gave his rookie quarterback 3 choices and trusted him to make the right one. The Washington Commanders came out, lined up in a shotgun formation. The Daniels had a choice to hand the ball to running back Brian Robinson Jr., who was lined up next to him on the left side, run the ball, pull the ball, and run it to the left side of the offensive formation himself, or stay alive as a passer and find a receiver downfield. Now, ultimately, he chose option number 3 and found Olamide Zaccheaus in the end zone, but it's because of the impact that Jayden can make as a runner, and it's because of the decision-making that this play works. With the Atlanta edge defender crashing down on the run action, Daniels smartly takes the ball out of Brian Robinson Jr.'s gut, keeps the ball himself, tucks it away, and looks like he's aiming to run around the left end. But the Atlanta Falcons safety on that side of the field crashes down to play against the Jayden Daniels keeper. When he does that, it puts the Atlanta Falcons cornerback on that side of the field in conflict. He's got Ben Sinnott, in the flat, or he's got Olamide Zaccheaus running behind him into the end zone. Now the corner at one point says, I need to get deep into this receiver's area, does so, but when Jayden Daniels chooses that deep route into the end zone over the short flat route, which would have converted the 4th down as well, and sees that cornerback starting to drift into the end zone, he makes a throw that counters his own momentum, right? Jayden Daniels is running to his left. The throw, he's got to counter his own momentum that's going to take that ball further to the left, which would have taken it to where that Falcons defender was drifting into, and makes the throw a little bit awkward. It's certainly harder to do, especially full speed, than it looks, I think. And it makes the ball just a little bit more awkward for Olamide Zaccheaus, who makes an amazing adjustment, makes the play, makes the catch. And that's how you get the first touchdown, man, is you trust your quarterback and you give him options and you say, go make the right choice based on what this NFL defense is doing to you. And not only does Jayden Daniels make the right decision, he makes critical decision, because if they don't score there, they could possibly lose this game, as we see as the game continues to unfold. So those are our 3 things to sustain moving forward, our 3 things that we want to leave behind in Week 17. Scary home finale for Terry McLaurin. The Commanders are currently the 6th seed in the NFC playoff picture, so there's a very slim chance that they could host a playoff game. If the Commanders and the Green Bay Packers finish 6-7 like they are now, and the Commanders and the Green Bay Packers make it all the way to the NFC Championship game, then the Washington Commanders will actually host that championship game. So there is a sliver of a chance that the Commanders could have another home game. But if not, and most likely not, this was Terry McLaurin's last home game of 2024, and it didn't go very well. And we know that in the postseason, this team is going to need big performances from Terry McLaurin in order to do something like make it to the NFC Championship game. So we need to see this Week 17 performance yet again become the anomaly, not become the new norm. 1 catch for 5 yards on 7 targets. And look, there's at least 1 drop in there. I counted more than 1 drop. PFF only gave him 1 drop. It's fine. We can debate it. It doesn't matter at the end of the day. Some of that is certainly on Terry. Now, while the team was able to come away with the win, despite the absence from Terry McLaurin, the postseason is going to be quite scary, to lean into the nickname. If this team can't find a way to get him in the fold, even when opposing teams are actively trying to not get him or not to prevent him the ball, deny him the ball. So we got to see them be able to do that even on rough nights like we saw on Sunday night. Next one, foot meat bullet. We're talking about the team here. Last week, 5 turnovers against the Philadelphia Eagles. This weekend, 12 penalties. And not all of them are on offense, but still, man, 12 penalties. It is hard to win an NFL game when you're hurting yourself that much. Those two facts are both impressive for the amount of resiliency and determination that the Washington Commanders showed in both those games, but also troubling. And the good news here is that Dan Quinn knows that they can't possibly sustain winning long-term by making those types of mistakes. And so you know that they're going to be, this isn't going to be we won, no harm, no foul. We'll do better next time. Gee golly, let's go get them. No, that team is going to be in the lab on the wide erase boards, trying to figure out a way to make those things better and get back to a cleaner brand of football, both turnover-wise and penalty-wise. And again, Jayden Daniels even had an interception in this last game. The final thing that we want to see improved, I titled it Stretching Too Far. Early in the season, we asked defensive coordinator Joe Witt Jr. how he felt about his team's ability to defend C-gap and D-gap runs that basically go outside of the tackle. He admitted at that time that they could be better, that they were working on getting better, and they were determined to get better. And we saw that they did get better. I think over the course of the season, they've gotten a lot better in that second-level pursuit, containing the edge, pushing guys out wide, not letting them get lanes upfield, and all those things. Obviously, every team has a moment here or there, but when you have a game like this one that, especially in the first half, is not going your way, and even in the second half, as it starts going your way a little bit, is still close, is still a very tight competition, that's when you need these types of things to really get picked up. And Joe Witt delivered on his word, but there's 2 critical runs in Week 17 that really stood out to me that went outside the tackles, and they gained 10 yards or more for the Falcons and nearly derailed the Washington Commanders' 11th win of the season. The first one came in the second quarter, less than 2 minutes left in the half. Atlanta already has the lead, and it's got the ball at its own 37-yard line. Falcons running back Bijan Robinson carried the ball for 10 yards before being tackled by Jeremy Chinn on a 2nd-and-1 play. And he was able to do so because it looks to me like left side edge rusher Dante Fowler Jr. is supposed to be able to maintain the edge. Instead, commits way too far inside, expecting it looks like an inside run by Bijan Robinson, takes himself completely out of the play. And when Bijan gets to the edge, cornerback Michael Davis is the only guy there to try to stop him. Michael Davis had suffered a shoulder injury earlier in the game making a tackle, so you know he's already kind of wounded, not really at his best in that situation. So, and on top of it, he's just not known for being a great tackler anyway. So Davis makes a good effort, tries to shoestring tackle him, trip him up, grab him by the ankle, somewhat effective, but Bijan is able to still gain positive yards. Jeremy Chinn cleans up the tackle, preventing a bigger gain, but at the end of the day, it's a 10-yard gain. It's an explosive run. It gives the Falcons a new set of down and the ball near midfield. Eventually, the Falcons would get a 39-yard field goal from Riley Patterson that put Washington in a 2-score hole entering halftime. Now we move to the fourth quarter, and it was Atlanta receiver Ray McCloud that then rips off the next explosive run against this defense, and he gained 14 yards on his run. He gets all the way down to the Commanders' 5-yard line in the final minutes of the contest. It was just outside the 2-minute warning here. Now, the Falcons use at-snap motion to get the ball to McCloud, who was coming across the formation from left to right with a fake pitch to running back Tyler Algier thrown in to try and help steer the defense away from where the ball was actually going. Whichever part of all that worked, it worked, and ultimately resorted in the left side edge. This time it was Javonte Jean-Baptiste collapsing too far inside, getting outside the angle, or getting too far inside and allowing the outside angle to the ball carrier Ray McCloud. The drive ended in a game-tying touchdown. Now, if you go back and watch that series, from there you end up with the Wildcat formation snap that goes over Bijan Robinson's head and all this other stuff. So the Falcons didn't score from the 5-yard line, right? But the bottom line is, you're in a game this tight, you're in a situation where you got to have it. You need to win the thing. It's winning time, as they like to say. You can't be giving up runs like that because of the fact that you're giving up the edge and you're not keeping your ankles nice and sharp. So that's a big thing that we need to see the Washington Commanders clean up moving into Week 18, and then, of course, moving into the playoffs. Of course, after the gritty win, Coach Quinn emphasized the need to clean up those turnovers and penalties, like I said. And while we give our game ball to Jayden Daniels and Kliff Kingsbury for letting him do his thing, we will give a nod to some unsung heroes who stepped up in Week 17. All of that coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Time for game balls and our weekly favorite quote from Dan Quinn following the Washington Commanders' exciting overtime win over the Atlanta Falcons. And the quote, we kind of talked about it already. Dan Quinn knows that his team cannot continue to win turning the ball over as much as they did in Week 16 and suffering as many penalties as they did in week 17. Quinn said, quote, "No, you can't. Not to be who you want to be." And he said this to Chick Hernandez of WUSA 9 in their exclusive sit down every week after the game. He also continued and said, "We talked to the team about Tell the Truth Mondays. Where are we going? We recognized we left a lot on the field, and I thought it was a great demonstration of brotherhood, of guys finding ways to pick each other up to do things, guys stepping into spots due to injury. So that part I loved. But we also know to be the team we've been called to be, we've got to make sure we don't beat ourselves and we play like we're capable of playing," end quote. So you got to love a head coach that says, look, we're not good enough. We're not doing good enough, and we're going to continue to get better, but we've got to get better if we're going to be the team that we really want to be, because we've seen time and time again these players adopt the mentality of their coach. So if that's the mentality that head coach Dan Quinn has, that is the mentality that Bobby Wagner is going to have, Jayden Daniels is going to have, Sam Cosmi, Tyler Biadasz, et cetera, Frankie Louvu. And if that attitude continues to trickle down into the locker room, then I'm confident that they will be able to get it fixed. Will they be able to get it fixed in time for it not to bite them in the butt and end their season? That's the part we're going to have to figure out. If they don't do it this year, they'll definitely do it, I believe, next year. My game ball for this game goes to quarterback Jayden Daniels, again, continuing his record-setting historic rookie season. Look, I know Broncos fans are still clinging to hope. I know even some Jags fans are clinging to hope that Brian Thomas Jr. maybe will be the upset rookie of the year. Jayden Daniels is going to be the rookie of the year, guys. We can just get ready for the acceptance speech when the time comes. But also, I want to give a hat tip to this game ball to Kliff Kingsbury, man, because 2 weeks in a row now, Jayden Daniels basically had to put on the cape, go out there, and again, it's winning time. He's made winning plays, and Kliff Kingsbury is letting him do his thing. There are a lot of situations that I have seen in my time covering the National Football League where people get rookie quarterbacks, young quarterbacks, or whatever, and they say, no, don't be you. Be what I want you to be, even in these critical moments. The Washington Commanders have shown they trust Jayden Daniels. They trust him to make the right decisions, and they're not holding him back in any way, shape, or form. They might be holding their breath a little bit with some of the hits that he takes, but they're not holding him back, and I think it's a beautiful thing. The insider game ball also goes to Jayden Daniels, but I'll tell you what, this was a tight race. Olamide Zaccheaus comes in second place. He got a lot of love. Zach Ertz comes in third place, but there's only like 1 or 2 votes actually separating these three guys ultimately. A lot of voters, though, going the Jayden, Olamide, Zach Ertz routes. Jeremy Chin got some love. Dante Fowler Jr. got some love. Bobby Wagner, Quan Martin also getting some love from the defensive side of things, but obviously the offense kind of taking the cake there. Nick Allegretti also got some love, and one insider specifically who voted for Nick really pointed out that how about his calling protections after Tyler Biadasz went out, and I thought that was a really good point to bring up, so we'll talk about it here just for a little bit. Last time Tyler Biadasz couldn't play, Michael Dieter came in, backup center, but he was also trying to make the calls in protection. And we talked about it. I said, I don't know how hard it would be for a guard to make those calls, those protection calls. But after seeing what happened without Tyler Biadasz, it was pretty clearly evident that it might be in their good best interest for somebody else to make the calls. It's not realistic at all because it would take way too much time. But I even ideated out loud at one point in time, have Tyler stand next to Kliff, give him the protection calls from the sideline. Kliff, calls the protection into Jayden, then Jayden can call it in himself. But you'd have to do all of that before you hit 15 seconds on the play clock, because after 15 seconds on the play clock, the offensive coordinator and quarterback can no longer communicate. So just way too much of a time crunch, and so it wasn't really a serious suggestion. But Nick Allegretti coming out there and calling the protections after Tyler went out still wasn't perfect, but I think it was a lot better than when they put that on the shoulders of Michael Dieter. Just allow him to focus on being that lineman, be that center, get the ball to Jayden, don't worry about anything else. I think it was a very smart move, and I think Nick Allegretti did a pretty good job at it. So I like that vote. I like the votes that Nick got, but I also like that insider pointing out that part of why Nick Allegretti got the vote. It's going to wrap up today's episode. Our next episode, we're going to talk about the 5 things that we learned in Week 17 about the Washington Commanders. We'll have more comments and quotes from head coach Dan Quinn, and we'll lead all up into our crossover Thursday episode with Marcus Mosher of Locked On Cowboys. In the meantime, if you got questions or comments, all you got to do is text me. And in order to text me, all you got to do is go to Locked On Commanders or go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Become an insider today. For your next listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast. The Madman Tyler Rowland gets you kicked off in the morning and in the afternoon. Tony Wiggins brings you some real NFL talk. It's the all-new Locked On NFL, and it's twice per day. As always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every dayers. Thanks for coming through on a regular basis like you do. And until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and I will see you right back here next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.